Hello, I'm Mehrnaz Campbell, founder and CEO of Kimia and author of The Omni Advantage. Welcome to the first session of our LinkedIn Live series in 2025. I'm so glad you're here. I'm dialing in from sunny Pennsylvania, a sleepy little town about an hour from Philly. What about you? Where are you tuning in from, and what's the sky like where you are? It's beautiful blue skies here, but I'm sure it's probably different color in different parts of the world. So I'd love to hear from you. Please drop in a quick hello in the chat and let us know where you're dialing in and joining us from. At Kimia, my purpose is to unleash the human potential to create a healthier world. And I want to inspire pharma leaders to shift from being message bearers to becoming trusted advisors. And over the last 3 years, we've tackled the challenges of digital transformation in healthcare. Now, I want to take this series even further to spark connections, to inspire change, and to drive meaningful transformation that really improves outcomes for healthcare professionals, but more importantly, for the patients. I'm really passionate about helping pharma professionals feel confident using technology to improve their engagement. And that's why I've been interviewing inspiring leaders to learn from their experience and give them a platform so they can share their insights with you. Now I'm really thrilled to welcome Yam Sumbwanyambe, otherwise known as Yam, host of the Black Sherpa, to join us today. Hi Yam, it's great to have you here.
It's great to be here. I'm very jealous to hear of your blue skies, sunshine over here in East Yorkshire. We haven't got the same. It's getting towards the back end of the day. It's a little bit grey, but I'm going to bring a little bit of sunshine, so don't worry about it. It's all good.
Oh, you always carry the sunshine within you, Yam. It's so good to have you here. But I'm just reflecting, and I thought it must be really weird for you being on the other side of the table, because usually you're the one interviewing people and you're like my partner in crime, because we've been running the PM talk for PM Society for some time. But what does it feel like to be on the other side and being interviewed for you?
It's strange. It's a really great question and a good point. I was on a podcast, for example, for the first time that was released last week, and that was a really interesting experience. The podcast is run by a good friend of mine that really sort of focuses on social mobility, which is a topic that's close to my heart. And I went into that room really with a few clear points that I was focused on trying to talk about. The conversation went where the conversation went. And we had the most unbelievable session, felt like therapy, and hopefully shared some really interesting insights on my experiences as a black male in the pharmaceutical industry. I talked about being part of a mixed race family and some of what that looks like and various different things, but it wasn't necessarily what I had planned. And it made me think about the many amazing conversations I've had the privilege of being part of, and just really think a little bit differently about what it takes to bare your soul a little bit, be vulnerable and share those experiences. So I'm looking forward to today, and very pleased to be in what I would say is some brilliant hands, because I know you do the absolute most to make sure that your guests are well looked after and have such a powerful stage to talk about what I believe are some really, really big topics for our industry.
Well, it's a real honor to have you here. So this is not your first time, but hopefully it would be many of these opportunities for you to share your insights with the industry, because I think you're such an amazing gem and I think people can learn a lot from you. But let me, before we dive in, introduce Yam and tell you a little bit about him. So meet Yam, founder of Black Sherpa, which is a platform dedicated to helping underrepresented talent thrive in a corporate world. He has nearly 20 years of pharmaceutical industry experience, and Yam's focus has always been on what really drives transformation, which is people. He's led award-winning career development programs, shaped inclusive workplace culture, and delivered solutions that turn big ideas into meaningful actions. Yam has a talent for helping individuals and organizations break through systemic barriers, build capabilities, and create lasting success. As our guest today on Digital Transformation Series, Yam brings not just deep industry experience, but also a real no-nonsense practical approach to navigating change and unlocking the human potential. His mission is very simple, but very powerful. He wants to create a world where diverse leadership is the norm and everyone has a chance and opportunity to shine. I'm really thrilled to have you, Yam, here with us. And I'm really excited for you to share your insights and spark great conversations today. I usually kind of reflect back when I introduce the speakers and share their bios. I want us to reflect back. Do you remember how we met initially, like whether it was online or in person? Because I clearly remember the first time we met in person, but I just wondered, do you remember our first encounter?
Yeah, so online through the PM Society is how we came together. And I remember you coming into our L&D interest group as a real force of nature, lots of ideas, but twinning ideas with action, really sort of thinking about clever ways that we can get things done quickly in a way that has genuine impact. So feel really fortunate to have known you for the last few years actually and had the opportunity to work with you. But yeah, I very clearly remember that first meeting.
Oh, cool. Do you know, I never forget the first time we met in person because it was in London and we were gathering together as the members of the PM Society Digital Interest Group, and we ordered this 1 meter pizza and lots of chips. And I remember you came a little bit late and we were munching through the pizza. I was so excited to see you. So I associate seeing you in person with a 1 meter pizza. Don't ask me why. Maybe
I'm that food guy. That's all good. I'm that food guy.
Brilliant. So let's diving into the question. I've got plenty of questions for you, Yam, but this isn't about me. This is a live event and it is so much more engaging and fun when we focus on our audience's questions. So this is for you, our listeners and viewers, with Yam's expertise in marketing, human connection and inclusivity. Now is your chance to ask him questions. So please pop your questions in the chat, because I want to bring them into this conversation. And if you enjoy what Yam is sharing and saying, don't forget to like or comment, because we love to hear your thoughts and keep the conversation going. Your input would make this live event even richer. So let me kick off the questions and then I will bring the audience questions into the conversation. Yam, could you share some insight about your career journey so far, and also tell us about your new exciting venture that you just started?
So I think you've probably touched on quite a lot of the career so far. I'm a guy that's getting used to not saying he works for MSD or Merck, which is a place that I really feel privileged to have spent the best part of the last 20 years of my life. I came into the pharmaceutical industry probably in what's not a typical way now through sales. And I had to work hard to get into that space in the first instance after I finished university, where I studied at Leeds. But I still remember those early days as a representative in Humberside in Yorkshire, having the opportunity to be responsible for some amazing products that genuinely make a big impact on people's lives. And those early days, being out there on the road, talking to clinicians, making relationships, finding a way that I can add value to support them. And it's just been the most amazing playground to build skills, capabilities, and for me to make some of the most amazing relationships. And I believe it's an industry that's really sort of shaped who I am. I've had various different roles in that time, from sales moving into a lot of learning and development opportunities. I moved from our Gen Med part of our business and had the opportunity to move into more specialised medicine some time ago, and really had the opportunity to launch some amazing products and really start to get a very different perspective of how general population management looks like versus acute care of conditions that potentially can have devastating effects on not just the lives of the patients, but the families that they support as well. And being able to play a small part in that has been just the most amazing experience. But I suppose the one consistent theme in a lot of the roles that I've had, particularly as I moved from those spaces into more strategic and commercial roles, was the people element. How can we connect with individuals? How can we help to build the right skills, capabilities? How can we build the right connection and confidence for people to execute on these amazing plans. I think we're going to go a long way from the beautiful, pretty slides that we have that everybody talks about from a strategy perspective to actually how do we execute that. And that to me has always been messy. It's hard, and there's so many issues or challenges that we sort of sit in that space. But I've always been really lucky to be surrounded by the most unbelievable technical people, whether that's from a marketing capability perspective, from a sales capability perspective, and all of the other key support functions that sort of sit in terms of driving these big organizations, and like to play a key part in being able to bring the level of clarity around how we drive big projects, how we get people running around a common vision or goal, and really making sure that we keep the people at the center of what we're trying to deliver on, and whether those people are the patients and the customers that we're there to serve, or the internal stakeholders that we really need to ensure they're in the best possible position to deliver.
That's exciting. I think what resonates from listening to what you say is people are your really jam. You're inspired by people and you make great connections. So tell us about your new venture. So putting myself in your shoes, if you've been with MSD for 20 years, you said almost?
Yeah.
Did you join them and stay with them for 20 years?
Pretty much, yeah. So I had a short period of time as a contract representative before joining as a headcount, but I've been in that space for a very long time, and I feel very fortunate to have lots of opportunities to do different aspects of work within that organisation. But I think towards the latter part of the time that I spent there, I always sort of think about the 9-to-5 work that we have in that commercial excellence space. But one of the things that gave me a lot of pride is that that 5 to 9 space, where I had the opportunity to really sort of focus on things like equity, diversity, and inclusion, being part of building an EBRG within our organisation, helping our leaders to think through issues and challenges with relation to how ED&I looks and thrives within our organisation, and feel really fortunate to have been part of an organisation that's very much on the front foot in that space. However, those experiences allowed me to really put my experience into context. I often sort of think I've been given a lot of opportunity. I've had a long line of unbelievable managers that have really pushed, supported me, and enabled me. And some of that's me, some of it's about how I turn up and what I can give, and the potential I had back in the day, and some of what I've been able to realise. But actually, I was also really lucky. It wasn't until I started getting into that type of work that I'd started to get a very different perspective on how normal is the journey that I have as a black guy in industry, right? And not everybody in our industry has had that same experience as me. And with some of the different opportunities that I've had, I've really taken time to focus on how do we help people to, very similar to your mission, to really step into their zone of excellence, to fulfill their potential, to really maximize their potential within organizations. And one of the things I've definitely seen is if you haven't got the right exposure to certain things or information at the right time, it can be really difficult for even the best talent to thrive or to find their voice in such big organizations. And I just think there's such an opportunity to realize the diverse potential of the organizations that we have. I think there's bang loads of diversity in there. I think there's definitely work that we can do to sort of see how that runs up to the top of the ladder of the organizations that we're all potentially working for. And what I'm working on now with the Black Sherpa is starting to build the type of platform that allow us to do that in the same way that we do everything in this industry. Start from a data-led perspective, really think about, with the right information, how can we move away from ED&I being something that is seen as a cost, something that doesn't necessarily help us grow, to something that genuinely is a business imperative and included in driving business in the same way as all of the other big growth drivers that we potentially see as well.
I think that's so important. And I think we all have unconscious biases that we're not aware of until we challenged or think about it. And as I was getting ready this morning, I was kind of thinking about your podcast. I was thinking what's been my experience, and often we actually accept things because it's normal. And I've not shared this with you before, but in 1985, when I came to the UK as a foreign national, the term Home Office uses to describe your identity is an alien. And I actually Googled it and I said, do they still use it? And not only in US, they use it in UK and US. The term for a non-British resident or a non-US resident is alien. And I just thought, like, I remember one of the things I had to do, I was a student nurse, so I had to go to the police and report, every now and then to say, I'm still here, this is where I'm living. And I remember I went to the police station and said, like, who are you? I said, I'm Mehrnaz. At that time, I was using my maiden name. And I said, I'm an alien. I'm here to report. And I was kind of like laughing about it at the time, like I'm reporting as an alien. But just think about that. Even the terminology they use is quite degrading because you're not human. You're just somebody from out of space. And I'm just thinking, we're not conscious of some of these terminology we use or biases that we have, but they could be quite hurtful. And unless you're experiencing those biases, you don't know how much it hurts. And that kind of the benefit of having platforms like Black Sherpa to help people understand what it feels like for the other individual and kind of like bring them so they feel included and feel welcomed. And I think that's so important in corporate culture to say that leadership is an opportunity for everyone, not for a select few. So I'm really proud of you doing this work.
Thank you. And I think it's topical, right? Everybody on LinkedIn today watching this, you can see what's being shared, particularly in the States, whether it's what we've seen posted in inauguration, some of the conversations that have been had around policies changing for organizations like Meta. And I think you can easily, very quickly find yourself in a hole where you can sit and look around and think everything is so bad and everything is so bleak. There's a lot of bad practice out there, but there's also a lot of great practice. And I think in the industry that I love so much, where we are standing on foundational pillars of equality, of making sure that we're as ethical as possible, that we really take the chance to make sure that we drive that all the way through everything that we do. So I'm really trying to charge myself with a couple of things. One, how do I help underrepresented talent really sort of take control of their careers and put their best foot forward? And then two, how do I help organizations to navigate really tricky conversations? Because I see so many unbelievable leaders really struggle with tapping into some of these conversations because they don't want to say the wrong thing, or it's just so difficult. If I can do anything to try and drive that in the right way, I will.
Yeah, and looking at your history with MSC, I think it's a credit to MSC as a leading pharmaceutical company to create an environment that's given you the opportunity to grow in the leadership position, and even get to the stage that you want to go solo and set up your own mission on your company. So I think you is a testament and example of what is possible. So that's great. I'm just conscious we've got some comments. Samantha, it's great to have you here. So I hope the sun is shining in New Jersey because you're not far from me. And also, welcome to US. I hope you're being treated well as a non-resident alien. And it's good to have you, Aida, joining us from Valencia in Spain. And we've got Ben Kepi from London. So it's really good to have you. So, Yam, I want to ask you the second question. And by the way, can I encourage everybody else to pop in their questions, because it'd be much more exciting to ask your questions rather than just I'll go through my list. But I was going to say your story of joining pharma is just so adorable. Can you just share what inspired you to join pharma?
So I don't think I'm too different to most people, but I didn't grow up thinking as a child I want to work in the pharmaceutical industry, right? Most people pretty much fall into the industry, and I was pretty much the same. But I think one of the things that really brought pharmaceutical industry to my attention was when I was at university. One of my neighbours, as I moved into a block of the flats, he actually worked as a pharmaceutical rep, and I didn't know that. But what I did see is the beautiful car that he had on the drive, and the fact that he left most days in a very sharp suit. And at that point, very curious and thinking about what my next steps were, I got to know him and found out that this was the industry that he worked in. And that's what really sort of brought it to my attention. I haven't got this super honourable story about, at that point, I really wanted to go make a difference to healthcare, so on and so forth. I do think for me...
about it, though. That's brilliant.
That's my truth. I also come from a very medically minded family. So my dad's a consultant radiologist, and my mum was a children's nurse, diabetic specialist. So as I started to find out more about the industry, it was really interesting to get the very different perspectives on how my parents as clinicians viewed our industry and how they worked with them on very different things, and the value that there was for them to potentially offer in terms of support. And I think as I started to find out more about this industry, I could very quickly sort of see how the skills that I had could be applied in a way that would allow me to genuinely have an impact on things that are really important to me, work in a way that was so closely aligned to my values, and really learn that even some of the smallest actions that we take can potentially have such a big impact on people. So one of the things that I love about our industry, and actually one thing I will sort of tell you, is I was at an event earlier on today and talking to a gentleman, and when I talked about working in the pharmaceutical industry, he asked me if, do I believe in the industry? How do I feel about it? And it took me back a little bit. Like, his mindset was very much around people making money out of people's ill health. And it just reminded me that people do have that sort of thinking about this industry still. And some of that's because maybe some of the films that you might see on Netflix or whatever the case might be. But I think it's really important to know, that the work that goes on in this space, the research and the development is critical. The role that we play aligned to organisations like the NHS in helping people get the right medications or services at the right time is massively important. And it just made me really sort of think about how it is a space that I really sort of take pride on. So although I came into it in a way that's wasn't planned, I'd advocate it as an amazing space for people to apply the trade, or talented people to come into this area and genuinely have an impact on things that really matter.
Yeah, I think people tend to forget. Yeah, if it wasn't for the pharmaceutical industry, we wouldn't have been able to tackle COVID, and we're still being locked down. And it's just like, when the going is good, they just see the profit and the benefit. But when things are tough, then everybody's looking to pharma. So I think we need to have a balanced perspective. But thank you for sharing that, and thank you for your honesty. 20 years is a long time, and a lot we've seen change in the industry. And I think, I'm really curious to know, what are your observations about the common challenges that pharma companies face when it comes to, implementing their, HCP engagement initiatives, including, omnichannel, and what kind of strategies did you find that helped to overcome them with these obstacles, so we could communicate in a way that we can connect with them?
So, I think the reality is the challenges that we see aren't too dissimilar to many other industries. I think the word that you touched on there was change. We're living in a world that's rapidly evolving in so many different ways. And if we forget the industry for a minute and sort of think about the omni-channel space that you really operate in, how we're helping people sort of think about thriving in a digital landscape, the change in that space is even faster than anything else that we might potentially sort of see. And I think that's the thing that makes things difficult in our space. Being able to genuinely adapt in a way that we can really understand the issues or the challenges that our customers potentially have, and then deliver services in a timely fashion is hard. Being able to do that in a heavily regulated space and ensure our processes are robust, and ensure that we're able to operate in a way that's ethical is difficult. But also making sure that people are equipped internally in organizations to manage that change, I think, starts to become really hard. How do we help people to get clarity in terms of key outputs over a period of time? How do we make sure we've got the right people aligned to projects and they're communicated effectively? How do we make sure we take people on these journeys of change, which are constantly happening, and keep them energized and not fatigued? These are the key life skills of the new era of how these organizations are potentially sort of changing. And I think the organizations that are doing this really well simplify things on a level that's really hard to understand. I think it's so easy just to make things more complicated, add in new processes, put more stuff in, ask for more with less resources. I think the companies doing the best are really getting the scale right. They really understand the gravitas, the impact of some of the challenges that people have in this space. They're getting great talent and giving them the space and time to really sort of take them on. They're really pushing themselves to make big bets and think about what are the few things that they could potentially invest in that would have the biggest return, and making sure people get the space and time to focus on that. And then aligned to that, a big thing that I've been really sort of integral to is, how do you then start to build the skills around people delivering on that, right? And I think it's really important to note that the skills that have helped people to get to a certain space won't necessarily help them to deliver on everything that they might need to do in the future. So having an eye on that workforce of the future and doing it in a way that helps people to evolve, as opposed to expecting, right, okay, today we're going to change absolutely everything. The baby's going out with the bathwater and we're asking you to do things completely different. So that's difficult, because ultimately most people resist change. Not all change. I think there's a lot of people that go out there and they'll play the lottery, because that type of change where you get a lot of money feels really nice. But ultimately, change that's enforced on people can be really difficult to manage. And I think, again, the organisations that manage that part of the issue or the challenge that they potentially have can potentially deliver far more to the customers that they're potentially here to serve as well.
I love the way you say keeping it simple. And it actually reminded me of Erasmus Holm. Coincidentally, he works for MSD as well. He was the general manager of Netherlands, and now he's a regional director for Nordic. And on his LinkedIn banner, he's got this simple word saying, keep it simple. And I think as a leader, I think that's great to find out what are the key simple things we need to do. And I think when we go through change, everybody thinks we've got to do what we've always done and do something else on top of it, like just cramming, and everybody's like running around. And in terms of direction, we go in one direction, and then when it's changed, it's just going completely in the other direction, and then coming back. I think it's really good to have that strategic overview of what we're going to keep, what we're going to drop, and what we're going to decide not to do. But from the things that you think are really, really pertinent, you mentioned about understanding customers. How do you think we can get better at it? Because, we can be really busy communicating, but not necessarily adopting our approach and our mindset to be focused around customer needs. So how do you think adopting a customer-centric mindset could potentially transform the way pharma companies approach their engagement and maybe do less, but do it better?
So I love the fact that you talked about taking things away and prioritizing. Again, that mindset of adding things on is the hard bit. I think the reality is we need to continue to learn from consumer industries, industries that aren't regulated in the same way that we are, that get access to more information, to more data, that are able to test and experiment things in a very different way, and start to think about what are the great and high value practices that we can make work within the context that we live in. And I think that's the important bit. Like, we can't necessarily do everything that some of these organizations do, but actually there are elements that we can potentially take away and sort of really sort of put into play there. But I think beyond that, I often come to conversations with that whole mindset around, well, what does diversity look like? When we sort of think about the issues or the challenges that we've got, one of the big ones is, how do we genuinely understand the issues or challenges that our customers are facing in their communities, in their practices, in their surgeries, whatever that might look like? And I think one of the things that we can do is really think hard about how do we diversify the workplace so we have got really diverse teams that really can give that different perspective. And that's hard in this space. In many ways, we're elitist. Most people coming into this space are well-educated. They've been to predominantly the same type of universities. That most of them have probably had a relatively well-to-do upbringing, and they've been exposed to those different things. But how do we help to make sure that the cream rises to the top in terms of lots of extra super talented people that maybe haven't had those same experiences, that mean that when we're sat around the table looking at an issue or a challenge or a problem, that we're getting a broader perspective on what this might look like for our customers as well. So I think if we're able to amplify that type of innovation, there's lots of different ways that we can go about achieving that. Does that mean that we can then think very differently about, as you said earlier on, what do we invest in? What do we deprioritize? What does the message look like? How do we drive an omni-channel engagement based on really super tight insights that really help us to be at our very best?
Yeah, I think, the change starts, like, we can change the way we do things, like activities or targets and whatnot. But I think the shift happens. And I think it's the same with diversity as well as understanding customers. The change happens when we shift our mindset and like the values that we think are really important. I was observing a role play today. A pharmaceutical representative was role playing with the healthcare professionals, and I was listening. I was just an observer. I had my camera off and just listening. They were asking really good questions, really open questions. I was really impressed with the questions, and the healthcare professionals were providing information, but they were not listening to the answers. They were not like connecting with the answers, and they were asking another questions, which the answer was in the answer they gave previously. And I've seen that quite a lot in pharma. We kind of like communicate out. We're very smart, but we don't listen. There's so much clue in what the HCPs say. And I think sometimes you need to just unlearn to be open to learn rather than assume you know the answers. Oh, I know what the problem is, and we go in there. So I kind of like think we need to maybe slow down a little bit and pay more attention to the clues rather than just be so focused on pushing out. I don't know what you think about it, Yam.
So it makes me interested to know why you think that was happening. I know, and I take a slightly narrow view, like particularly when we're sort of thinking in those marketing engagement, I always feel really lucky. I've had the opportunity to work with some of the most amazing marketeers, and they're tuned in, they are listening, they're looking for those opportunities to connect. But it's not always easy to find the spaces where you can build the insights, you can get the level of data and information that allows you to do that in the way that's most effective. And I think from there, being able to pull through the cultural insight element of that starts to become really important. I think if we could get richer insights, we would have better outputs. The issue or the challenge is, how do you sort of establish that in the very first place? And I think that connectivity, when you sort of think about the omni-channel piece that you operate in, having that right marriage between what does marketing look like in that part of the machine, but also what does it look like from the sales end, and how you bring those two elements together starts to become really, really important. And I think that way that people potentially engage with a level of curiosity, being able to build trust based on asking great questions, being able to align the right information and data to those individuals at the right time based on what their needs are, starts to become very important. But to do that, you need to be open and vulnerable to understand how do you serve the individual that you're in front of, as opposed to pushing out the message that you believe is going to change the world. I think you really need to bring those two elements together to be successful.
Definitely be present in the moment and be curious. I think the brilliant examples you highlight, in your role and your experience as a global marketing leader responsible for capability development, what were the key behaviors that you found that you saw in leaders and teams that you thought was positive? And what were the things you saw that needs to change in order for us to be able to consistently deliver value to healthcare professionals and ultimately deliver, value to the patients?
So I'm not hesitating. I always find it interesting. Global marketing leader sounds like a really big and sort of fancy sort of title. I've had an opportunity to collaborate at lots of different levels within our organisation, and I do think in that space where it's not necessarily just about marketing, but more so about the learning and development aspect. How do we build the life skills of the modern day marketeer? One of the things that I think is really important to sort of call out is that we're genuinely seeing like a really important shift from how do we sell or hit those direct messages that you talked to earlier on, to a point where we can be credible partners that are educating and supporting the systems that we potentially have in play. I think curiosity is key. Having the right mindsets and aligning that to continuous development starts to become really, really important. Encouraging the right levels of collaboration across diverse teams, all of those things are in and they're working. I think the issues or the challenges that potentially sort of sitting there, and again, I'm going to start from a learning and development perspective, is sometimes more so around actually how do we bring learning and development to life in a way that makes sense? How do we help people who are really busy and incentivized in terms of outputs of various different projects that they might work on, to really prioritize the time to really think about, right, this is my level as a marketeer today. If I want to be better tomorrow, what are the things that I'm going to learn and how I'm going to implement them in my job that I can test and see, is learning this thing making a very difference in terms of the outputs that we potentially need to see. And I think that strategic approach to how people can support learning is hard. Being able to have the space and time to do that on top of the day job is hard. And I think we talk a lot about, everybody is encouraged to drive their own learning and development. But I often wonder how much space and time people get to do that, or how free they feel to do that. I know most people, if they sort of said to the manager, I'm blocking out this time to do X or Y, or they had a business proposition around doing a course, a lot of people will get that support if they position it in the right way. But being able to do it and make it a regular practice that supports development over time is key. And I think why I maybe start at that point is, your development doesn't necessarily need to be lots of big things and programs that are changing you, right? It should be continuous and gradual, but you need to make the space and time to effectively do it. And if you're not doing it, you're falling further behind in a world that, as we talked to earlier on, is constantly evolving and changing so quickly. So just to stand still, you need to be able to do a little bit. If you want to do something differential, you need to invest that time in a way that's going to make a considerable difference.
I'm just going to ask you a challenging question. is it the time that we need? Because I just think like back in, like, I started my career in industry 30 years ago. 30 years ago, if I had the question, I had to go to the hospital, go to the like library, get the BMJ, flick through them to find what I wanted. Now I have a question about any like clinical data or any information. I've got access to online sources, you know, you've got Google, you've got, you know, platforms like AI platform like ChatGPT-4. And I don't think learning is like how it was before you go to a classroom. There's so many opportunities for, you know, on the job learning. And, you know, I'm a member of a CIM, and every year I have to submit my, you know, reflective learnings to maintain the, you know, accreditation. But I find most of the things that I learn more about is the things I actually did in the job, not just going on a course or a training. And I think, you know, I was having a conversation with our team saying, talking about development. I said, like, a lot of, look at what we've done in the last 3 months. A lot of the things we've done, we've never done it before. We've got, like, even you and I, when we started the PM talk, we kind of like had to figure out how we use these platforms for doing the, you know, live, LinkedIn Live. These are all learning opportunities that doesn't take that much time, and we just do it on the go, but maybe we're not documenting it. And I think what I love you said about curiosity, if you've got that curious mindset, you can just learn for 2 minutes over coffee. You don't have to go in a classroom. Do you see us maybe seeing those elements of learning as development, or do we just see the classroom or courses as a development?
So it's not that challenging a question, but I think it's a really useful observation. You know, we started earlier on around what are some of the things that drive me. How do you empower an individual starts to become really important. I think the reality is, yes, if you as an individual invest in yourself, you will see the benefit of doing that. And actually, I think there's often quite a small percentage of people that prioritize that. If you're able to cut through the noise or the overwhelm of all of the aspects of the job that you potentially have, you're able to deliver within that job, but still make that space and time for you to progress, it can have a massive impact in terms of your career acceleration and the impact you potentially can have. So I think that's definitely a thing. And prioritizing that thing differentiates you from so many people within our organizations and space. But I also think there's another bit around the system. You know, do we incentivize or reward people for what they learn and actually how they can potentially demonstrate that? We incentivize people based on the outputs of the programs that they deliver on, how they're able to connect people through. You got to remember, in the industries that we work in, not everybody can sort of say, I did this thing and it had X value. It's really hard. So I do think there is an element around the system, and I don't think you can sit there and go, right, bang, everybody learn, and then this is going to be all good. But I think there's an important part around strategically, how do we create the space and time for it? How do we incentivize it in the right way that is will help to drive the right behaviors? But then actually, how do we create the standards? And, you know, you talked earlier on about like being able to demonstrate your learning as part of an accreditation. I often my wife is a dentist, and she's shaped quite a lot of my perspective on learning and development. You know, we've been together for pretty much most of the time that I've been in industry as well. And when I sort of think about her experience, we're so fortunate in our industry to have so much time, effort, and resources plugged into our development. We get so much access, it's unbelievable. And I look the other side, and like genuinely, she has to demonstrate on a regular basis that she is she's developing herself through various different courses, and she needs to collect those points, and she needs to be validated through tests to make sure that she can practice. And as a professional, I think there's something really noble in that. In addition to that, she has to pay not just her time, but she has to pay money to make sure that she's going through the courses and keeping well accredited. And I think there's definitely something in there. And I don't want to be that guy that's going to say, right, everybody in the pharmaceutical industry is going to have to start paying for their own development. But I think being able to recognize the value of how much we're invested in and the opportunity, I think you set yourself up in the right way, you really can sort of drive yourself.
Definitely. I guess I've always felt driven to learn, because you come to a country, you're an alien, you don't speak the language, you kind of like feel you already have a couple of disadvantages. So you want to, you know, get yourself back to the base level, which brings me to my next question. How can pharma better identify and nurture talent from underrepresented backgrounds to help them play a key role in and even lead to digital transformation efforts? How can we create that space?
So, you know, I think we started to talk about the whole idea around diversity earlier on, but actually I think Edie and I collectively has to sit together. You can't just be diverse. You need to really sort of think about what does inclusion look like if we're able to diversify our workforces. And I think some of what we have to sort of start with is genuinely recognizing the world that we live in isn't fair. Not everybody gets the same opportunity. And for some sections of our workforces, of our societies, it's not just about work, it's not just about farm, it's everywhere. The systemic barriers that are often invisible that some people are having to try and take on that potentially can have an impact on how well they're able to step into their circle of genius. So I think being able to recognize that is the first bit, and then being able to engage in that conversation proactively and in a meaningful way. And I think really taking a human approach to that, like to have the level of empathy to think about some of these things. If you're not affected by them, that's not normal. So, you talked about earlier on, a person that's not an alien is never going to think about what it feels like to be called an alien on a form. And that's not their fault, right? But I do think we're going to try and find ways where we can bring some of the issues around these systemic barriers into sort of play, and then sort of think about how we support that in the right way. And, one thing that's often sort of shaped my thinking about like this space around ED&I is like the Parker report. If you've not seen it before, definitely one worth sort of checking out. It's been out for a period of time now. But when I sort of think about myself as somebody that's quite visual, one of the things that report did was literally to sort of put out pictures of the faces of all of the people in the top jobs within the UK. And you can see very quickly, like, the level of diversity really isn't there. And that's changed now. The report is pretty old now, but actually it's evolved and it's moved from where it was. But I wouldn't necessarily say it is representative of the country that we're all potentially sort of sitting in now. So I think there's a bit around, if we can recognise that we potentially need to diversify our spaces, what does then doing that look like? And I think there's a bit around taking on the issues or the challenges that sort of sit in that space. How do we find a space where by investing in a few, it's not necessarily disadvantageous to the many, but also recognizing to drive those type of changes, some people are potentially losing out and making sacrifices. So you've got to be able to tell a story around that in a way that helps people to sort of come along on that journey, which I think becomes really important. Being able to recognize that when we talk about the best person getting a job, for example, I think often there'll be lots of people that could do a job, and you might want to make a choice or a decision to put somebody into that role for a particular reason. They've all been assessed and they've all passed, but actually it might not be the one person that got the highest number score. That might be controversial to some people. But then also, how do you sort of create the environments? How do you create the right type of connections? How do you use things like mentoring, coaching to help people to really fulfill their potential, but also really start at the bottom line where, even sort of thinking how people are onboarding into organizations and really helping to ensure from that first day, they're given the best opportunity to understand this is how this particular space works. This is how you could potentially navigate it effectively, and help us understand what we need to do to support you to be who you are and deliver your best to our organization. So there's so much in there, right? But I do think there is the bit around almost a glass ceiling that you might sort of see. I think that whole idea of it's really difficult to be what you can't see. We're really lucky that we do have some unbelievable talented leaders from underrepresented backgrounds in this space. How do we make sure other people recognise that they can be the next one, and they really sort of see people sort of breaking through in that space as well?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I think you make a really valid point. If you don't experience that, you wouldn't be consciously aware of it. Like, I don't know what it's like to be a Black man working in northern parts or live in northern parts of England, or what it's like. I can maybe imagine it, but I don't know what that is like. And I remember a few years ago, I was having a conversation with my best friend, Debbie. She's kind of like from her ancestors from Jamaica. And I was just made a comment to her. She said, Mehrnaz, like my color is my identity, and she gave me a different perspective that I never thought about. I thought I understood what it feels like because I've come from, different types of diversity, but I didn't. And we can't assume we do, but it's not our fault that we don't. We just need to create that space for people to learn. It's really good to have our audience. And I think Ben just made a comment referring to my phrase that I always talk about, is about taking massive imperfect action. And I think maybe to seek understanding in this area, we need to take massive imperfect action. And I just want to encourage Samantha, Aida, Ben, and anybody else who's listening to just pop your questions for you, because again, this is not just about the conversation about you and I. They can enrich this conversation by adding to it. Yam, you won an award for an initiative that you created, Lead Your Career at PF Awards. Can you tell us a little bit about it? Was that kind of like around this concept of identifying and nurturing talent?
So yeah, a big part of that. And again, was fortunate to do this in collaboration with some great people as part of our EBRGs. So essentially, we created an initiative that took place over 12 weeks, which was focused on helping individuals to take control and lead their careers. Mm-hmm. We did a survey some time ago, which really investigated and helped us to sort of think about what are the issues or the challenges that Black employees within our organisations face in terms of their career development. And within that subset of data, we were also able to sort of have a look at, for those people that were senior leaders within our organisations, what are the issues or challenges that they faced on the way to the top, and what is the advice that they would potentially give to other people that have those aspirations. And we were able to, through this survey, to identify cohorts of individuals that believed that they had that capability. We didn't know if they did or if they were any good. But ultimately, they gave us what they believed they need in terms of help and support. And we were able to build a 12-week program that took the insights of those individuals, but also the advice from those people that had already navigated those challenges. And you wouldn't be surprised by the context. I think being able to really deliver in your day job is just the access item in the first element. Being able to start to think around your goals and aspirations and values and how they align to the organization that you work for. Then being able to plot, how can you effectively position yourself in projects and build the right level of visibility internally, the right network. And then how do you genuinely understand how you can add value to the broader organization and demonstrate that on a frequent basis. And mentorship starts to become really important in that space. And we created a relatively simple program that didn't cost a lot apart from time and used the internal resources that we had available. But ultimately, we've seen year on year an intake of 15 to 18 people who, from that group, 80% of them have achieved career progression within 1 year of finishing that program. And we've worked to start to think about how can we follow up those people in terms of their development over 5 years. And we want to be able to start to create a really robust data set, which helps us to demonstrate the impact of aligning people with the right resources, making sure that you have a development plan that makes sense, making sure that you can engage with the resources that are available to you in the most effective way, making sure that you can work with your manager and whatever support resources are available to really take that career progression seriously. And really sort of borne out some of my perspective when I sort of think about you get to a certain level within an organization and you start to get access to either information, opportunities that actually, if you knew some of this stuff a little bit earlier in your career, it could potentially have an impact on maybe some of the choices that you might make. And those choices could impact how much impact you have on the organization, internally the people or the people that you there serve. It could have an impact on the type of work that you're able to do, how much fun that you have along the way, or it could have an impact on your career aspirations, how high you can go and how much money you might earn as you're going on that process. So try to key people into that has been like a really special part of that program.
I think this is a fantastic initiative. And I think the fact that you even gave them the opportunity to be part of this initiative means that there is possibilities for them. And I think that gives them hope, because I remember last year when I got into the Goldman Sachs 10K Escape program, I met with the other people and we were just felt so privileged just to be there, like going to Oxford. I'm thinking like that was like all our dreams, all our life. So even just being chosen, and I'm just so impressed with the results. So are you planning to track that to see what's the 5-year outcome of these people who enrolled in this program?
So I'm not personally. What feels really strange is, I did this with the most amazing group of people. And one of the things I'm most proud about is it's a program that will stay after I've left. And what you sort of said there, like community is massively important to me. And I think it's a really important part of that program. What we've seen is every year we're building the alumni of the people that have gone through this process, and they proactively support each other as they look to think about their development, starts to build a network of people that can really help and support each other through that process. And I think what's been amazing on top of that is, the organisation I was at that time had lots of different arms and lots of different spaces. And what we're seeing is people coming together to better understand the broader aspects of our business based on those small groups focused on supporting continued development and then applying that to help to drive your career progression. Even to the point where the year before take the opportunity to run the following year. So it's helped us to sort of think about a sustainable model, which I think is it's not easy, but it's something that can be replicated and something that could be picked up and installed into lots of different spaces. And my point is actually, it doesn't take a lot of time or resource necessarily to have a differential impact. It just needs somebody or the space and time to really think about how do we do something that's different and aligns to the needs of the individuals, and then how can we potentially reap the benefits of that as a result.
That's fantastic. You left your legacy behind through that initiative, and that's something you should be really proud of. We've got a question from Ben, so let's have a look at that. Ben says he loves to hear your thoughts on any core development pieces. It could be career skills related or frameworks that you think are easy to adopt and have had great impact, but aren't commonly talked about or used.
It's a great question, Ben. Thank you. We can try and reinvent lots of different things. I actually think some of the most basic things are the really important ones. If we sort of think about the program that we talked to there, how many people really invest the time to do a proper plan in terms of your development and really clear around what the next couple of steps are? And ultimately, I think one of the things I've learned, some of that through some really great advice, is you can have that plan. It might not be what happens, but having a fixed point that you're trying to get to can have such a big difference, because then as you're engaging with the organization, being able to tell people what you're trying to do can make it significantly easier for other people to help you. This is how you might be able to get to that point. Or if you're interested in X, have you thought about this or that? So I think being able to start in that space, really thinking about, okay, how do I get clarity on who am I, what are my values, and what am I trying to do within this business? Start there and get that right. The next bit is actually to not just have it on an internal system or a slide set. Really think about how do you engage the business in terms of driving that and making sure that you protect the space and time to be able to do that. Those aren't skills or capabilities. Those are processes that are openly available to everybody. But I think the people that are able to fly through organizations manage to pair the foundational aspect of career development with having great conversations, engaging with people, being open, being curious. So I think there's then the right level of soft skills that start to come into that space. How do you make sure that you are asking great questions? How do you make sure that you are taking insights and actually putting them into action? I think this whole idea of positive action starts to become really important. Like, you can ask all the most amazing questions in the world and you can take all these insights, but if you're not going to do anything with it, then it doesn't really matter. So if you can get to that spot where you've got positive action, it's funny how even the smallest step forward starts to build a level of momentum. And if you can get people around you on that journey, people can potentially be relatively unstoppable. So no massive framework there, Ben. Do simple things, use the tools and resources that the business is built with, and making sure that you're optimizing those to achieve your personal objectives. But you have to start by knowing what those are.
Brilliant comprehensive answer. Ben, my quick response would be just ask why and so what. Because if you know why you're doing it and so what, if you have achieved it, then you kind of helps you to prioritize what you're going to focus on and what you're going to drop. My motto this year is do less, but do it better. So I think we need to maybe stop trying to do everything and just focus on one or two things that really makes a difference. We've got a comment and a question from Samantha. Samantha thinks your session is great, and I agree with her. If you could pick one, which will be hard, she knows, what would be your favorite memory from 20 years at MSc?
My word, what a question. That's so hard. And the reason that's so hard is I genuinely feel like there's been phases to my career, and there's just been so many things that have happened as I've sort of gone through that process. I think the bit that I would sort of share, and it probably wouldn't be maybe routine to most, but I feel like I've had the most amazing journey at MSD. But as most people, I've also had downtimes in that space. And although I've achieved lots, there's been times where my performance hasn't been absolutely everything it potentially should have been. And I have a really distinct memory at a time where I was potentially struggling, somebody really advocating for me, somebody supporting me, somebody backing me up in a way that really helped me sort of pick up in a space where I probably was really, really struggling. So I could talk about product launches. I could talk about some of the most amazing nights where actually I can't remember some of the things that happened. I can talk about the fact that I've got genuine friends that, we go to each other's weddings, we go to people's homes. It's that level. But I think there's moments like that where you genuinely sort of see people love, respect, value you, which is very special and very dear to me. And I don't think you always get or to see those moments or hear about them. So this one particular moment where somebody really, really stepped in to support and lift me when I needed it was probably the moment that stands out more than anything else.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. I'm conscious of time. We've got only a few minutes, but I don't want us to finish without giving you an opportunity to talk about Black Sherpa and what inspired you, but also what you're hoping to do with Black Sherpa. So give us a quick roundup of your desire and hopes for it.
So I think you probably introduced it almost as good as I do myself at the beginning of our conversation. I think I'm hoping people have got a feel or a flavour that I'm somebody that's on a journey. I've spent time navigating the corporate world. I've won some battles. I've had a couple of losses. I've got lots of bumps and bruises as a result, but I've learned a lot. I'm really passionate about having the opportunity to pay it forward. And I think when I think about our industry, I'm uniquely placed to align what I believe underrepresented professionals might need in terms of support for their development, but also to give context to the choices and decisions that are driving corporate enterprises. And I think if we can meet in a space where ED&I doesn't feel like a dirty word, where people respect that, not seeing ED&I as a cost is the reality for a lot of people. People are really trying hard to figure out ways to deal with massive societal issues and the cost. But if we're going to move to a space where it's considered to be a cornerstone of how we drive our businesses, how do we drive the right level of accountability? How do we apply the same robust processes that mean that we're super focused on what are we measuring to demonstrate our value and impact? And we do exactly the same with this. And if there's ways that I could potentially help or support with that, that's what I'm investigating in now. And I've got some amazing ideas, which I won't share completely now, but I'm in a space where I'm engaging with lots of different people and thinking about the best way that I could potentially have an impact in this space. And some of it might be just creating the space for people to be able to talk effectively in a way that they can then engage with some of the hard and challenging topics that we potentially have here, or control and run their careers.
Fantastic. Yam, I've known you for a couple of years now, and I think as I've seen you develop this concept, I actually see you're so passionate about it. You really care about the topic and you've got a really strong why. And I have no doubt because it's something you love, you're going to really enjoy it and achieve great success, because it's as if you found your niche that you want to really focus on. And you've got so many talents. You could do lots of different things. You could have stayed doing what you were doing in MSc and be, uber successful. But I'm just really excited for you because I think you found something that is close to your heart. And I think you're going to make a big difference. I'm really proud of you for even taking the decision to go down this path, because it's not easy to be an entrepreneur and a startup. But I feel strongly that I'm really confident you're going to be successful because of that passion. I was going to say, I usually ask people who've had the chance to read my book to share their thoughts. And I know you've got a copy of my book, The Omni Advantage. And I know you started reading it, right? This is your chance. Oh, thank you. You're going to dig it up from, super. Thank you, Yam. I was going to say, this is your chance because, it's not rehearsed. It's your chance to share your honest, candid feedback and maybe even tell us what's your favorite chapter so far. And you can say it's rubbish if you want as well. It's your choice.
That'd be really harsh. No, I think one of the things that I love about what you're doing with the book is really starting to think about what does omnichannel mean? I think omnichannel is a term that's banded around lots of different organizations right now, and not everybody's completely comfortable with it. But in a space where marketing meets sales and engagement with our customers, I think the advice that you're giving people around some of the considerations of the issues or the challenges, I think starts to become really, really important. So I've got through most of it. I wouldn't call out like an individual chapter as a favourite, but what I would suggest is it's genuinely a valuable resource for anybody that's trying to figure out what does omnichannel mean in our industry specifically. I think it's all well and good to have examples from elsewhere, but I think really start to think about what can we apply in this space in a way that's genuinely going to have a difference is something that potentially could be of value. So omnichannel advantage, definitely one to add to your Amazon list, guys.
Thank you so much. You know, the whole reason I wrote the book was that I was really tired of seeing us as an industry communicate with it without really truly connecting. And for me, connection is so much more than just communication. Is about fully engaging and focusing on the other person, in this case, healthcare professionals and patients, and not talking about ourselves or our products. And that's the core message of the book. And it's also the mission that drives everything at Kimia and my team here. I just want to say it's been absolutely incredible to have you here today. And I'm sure our audience really enjoyed hearing your insights. Thank you so much for making time, joining us and sharing your knowledge and your expertise. We'll curiously follow, your progress on Black Sherpa mission. Also want to thank everyone who joined us live. Thank you for being part of this conversation, sharing your comments, asking great questions, and I hope you found value in what Yam shared and what we discussed today. Because at the end of the day, you alluded to it, Yam, everybody's talking about omnichannel, but what we really need is not omnichannel, is meaningful engagement with healthcare professionals. And engagement is not just about coverage and frequency. It's about listening, understanding, and adding real value. And that's how we become their trusted advisors and they want to work with us. And I believe, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, that we all collectively as an industry have the power to do something so much bigger than ourselves. And by breaking those silos and focusing on people and empowering them and investing in their growth and development, we can unlock their potential to collectively create a really healthier world. It's come to the time that we close. Is there any final words you want to say?
I just want to thank you for making space, Mehrnaz. You're doing some really important work in terms of making this type of content available to people. So I really appreciate you. I'll call out maybe one final element. I think it's really important to tap into this whole idea around energy and passion for this type of topic, but ultimately that's not going to help us to drive the change that we potentially want to see. I think it helps to get people together. I think it brings people to the table. But I think my final comment is I'm in a space where I genuinely am building and want to build in public. And my invitation is to get the right partners and bring people to that table. So just an invitation, if anybody would like to connect to learn more about what I'm building, how I'm positioning it, and potentially how I could help or support them as well. I'm here, I'm available, and I look forward to that type of connection. But yeah, just a final thank you, Mehrnaz, for your time and making the space on your platform.
Absolutely. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much. And please connect with Yam and listen to his Black Sherpa podcast. It's incredible. And he's such a good host. I'm constantly learning from him. And I was going to say, I'll see you in February for our next live session with Nico Bennett on 25th of February. Bye from me and Yam, and look forward to seeing you soon and continue our conversation.